There is a moment in every workplace that arrives quietly, without fanfare, dressed up like a reasonable request. It does not knock. It does not announce itself as the thing that is going to change the entire temperature of your building for the next 3 weeks. It just walks in, wearing a blazer, sits across from you in a director's chair, and tells you, with a smile that does not quite reach the eyes, that you are too happy, that you are, in fact, a problem. I need you to picture a behavioral healthcare agency, 14 licensed clinical therapists, each of them trained to read emotional subtext, body language, patterns of withdrawal, the thousands small signals a person gives off when something is quietly going wrong inside them. These are people who have spent years learning how to notice. And I need you to picture me, the receptionist, the one person in that building whose job it is to be the first face people see, sitting at my desk, stone still, expression neutral, handling paperwork with the efficient silence of someone who has been told, in no uncertain terms, to stop being herself. What happened next was not something I planned. I did not walk into that director's office with a strategy. I walked out of it with an instruction, and I followed it, exactly, to the letter, every syllable. And within 2 weeks, 14 trained mental health professionals became so collectively alarmed by the change in my demeanor that they staged what I can only describe as an informal wellness intervention, and the director who ordered the silence had to call me back in and tell me, with a pained expression she was clearly trying to hide, to please, for the love of everything, start talking again. This is that story. Let me paint you the building first, because setting matters, and I want you to feel it. Behavioral healthcare is a specific kind of environment. The hallways are quieter than you would expect. People move through them with a particular kind of intentionality, the way you move through a library or a hospital, not out of imposed rule, but out of genuine awareness that the work being done behind closed doors is serious. Our agency reviewed and processed paperwork from various inpatient psychiatric facilities, which meant that the clinicians coming in every morning were carrying caseloads that were, by any objective measure, heavy. So when I say that my job was to be the warmth at the front, I do not mean it in a decorative sense. I mean it functionally. I was the person who greeted everyone when they walked in. I was the one who asked about the commute, who noticed when someone looked like they had not slept, who slid a stack of assignments across the desk and said something small and human alongside it. Several of the therapists had told me directly that it mattered, that the 2 minutes at my desk in the morning was a kind of reset before they went into the work. One of them, a woman named Dr. Fenella Osei, told me once that I was the only person in the building who asked how she was doing and actually waited for the answer. I do not say this to congratulate myself. I say it because it is the context the director apparently did not account for when she decided I was the problem. Her name was Marguerite. I will not give her a last name because she does not need one for this story. Marguerite had been running the office for about 2 years when the incident I am describing took place. And here is the thing about Marguerite that I genuinely could not figure out. She was inconsistent in a way that felt almost architectural, like someone had designed her behavior to keep the people under her permanently off balance. For a full month, she and I would get along beautifully. She would stop by my desk in the morning, we would exchange pleasantries. Sometimes she would share something funny that happened over the weekend. I would go home, feeling like I understood where I stood. Then, as if a switch had been thrown somewhere I could not see, the next month she would be watching me, noting things, bringing up small observations in a tone that was calm but loaded, the kind of calm that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up, because you know it is not actually calm at all, it is precision. I had been trying to read the pattern for months. There was no consistent trigger I could identify, nothing I had changed, no incident I could point to. She just cycled, and I had learned to brace myself when the temperature dropped. The morning she called me into her office, I already knew what kind of month we were in. I sat across from her, and she folded her hands on the desk, the way people do when they have already decided what they are going to say and are simply waiting for the formality of your presence before they say it. "I've been noticing," she began, "that you spend quite a bit of time in conversation with the clinical staff. I said I was friendly with everyone, yes. It's become a concern, she said. They come to your desk, you go to theirs, there's a lot of back and forth. I've had to think about whether it's affecting productivity. I pointed out, as evenly as I could, that my work had been completed on time, consistently, without exception, that I had not missed a deadline, misfiled a case, or left a single assignment unprocessed. She nodded like she had heard me and found the information mildly irrelevant. It's not about the specific tasks, she said. It's about the culture it creates. It can make the environment feel less professional. I need you to pull back. Keep your conversations to greetings, hand out assignments, state what they're for, and return to your desk. And here is where I want to pause, because this next moment is the one that mattered, the one where everything that followed was decided. I looked at her. I looked at her for long enough that she shifted slightly in her chair, and then I said quietly and without any edge in my voice that I would do exactly as she said. She smiled. It was a satisfied smile, the kind that accompanies the belief that you have just solved something. I smiled back, and I left her office, and I went back to my desk, and I thought about the word exactly. Because here is what Marguerite had not considered. She had given an instruction to a person who works in a building full of people trained to monitor the emotional well-being of others. She had turned off the warmth in a behavioral healthcare agency and then returned to her office, apparently expecting nothing to happen. I want you to think about that for a moment before we go further. 14 therapists, 2 weeks. What do you think was coming? The next morning, I arrived at the same time I always did, put my things down, and settled in. When the first clinician walked through the door, I smiled and said good morning, a real smile because I am not built for cold, and I was not going to perform misery. But when she paused at my desk and started to say something about her weekend, I cut her off gently. I'm sorry, I've got to get back to the work. Have a good morning. The look on her face was brief but notable. A small flicker of something. She nodded and went to her office. I did not explain. Marguerite had not told me to explain. She had told me to limit conversation to greetings and task handoffs, and that is what I was doing. When I made my rounds with the assignment folders, I went office to office, knocked, opened the door, set the folder down, said what it was for, and left. One of the clinicians, a man named Tobias Weir, who had worked there for 7 years and had the kind of seniority that came with an opinion about everything, looked up from his desk with an expression I can only describe as mildly baffled. You doing all right? He asked. I'm fine. That's your preliminary review set for the Hargrove facility. I'll let you get to it. I left before he could follow up. This went on for several days, and I want to be honest about something. It was not comfortable. I am, genuinely, a person who likes people. I like the small rituals of connection that make a shared workplace feel like something other than a transaction. Cutting them off felt unnatural in my body, like walking with a deliberately shortened stride. But Marguerite had given me a clear instruction, and I was a person of my word. By the end of the first week, something was shifting. I could feel it without being able to name it precisely. The hallway conversations that would sometimes include me no longer did. People nodded when they passed my desk, but did not stop. The texture of the mornings had changed. The second week is when things got interesting. They started coming to me individually, not in groups, not as a coordinated effort, but one by one, at different times of the day, each of them drifting up to my desk with a kind of studied casualness that I recognized immediately for what it was. These were people who used that same studied casualness with patients every single day. Dr. Fenella Osei was the first. She pulled a chair up to the side of my desk and sat down in the way she probably sat down next to people in intake sessions, unhurried, slightly angled, non-confrontational. I just wanted to check in, she said. You seem different lately. I'm fine. Everything's great. I've just been heads down. Heads down is fine, but distant is different. You don't have to tell me anything. I just want you to know that my door is literally always open. If something's going on outside of work or inside of work, that space is available. I thanked her. I said I truly appreciated it and that I was genuinely okay. She watched me for a moment the way clinicians watch people who say they are genuinely okay, which is to say, with the particular attentiveness of someone who is quietly running a second evaluation beneath the first. Then she nodded and went back to her office. Tobias came by that afternoon. His approach was different, more direct, less clinical. Level with me. Did somebody say something to you? Because you have been a completely different person this week, and it is throwing everyone off. I'm just focused on the work. Assignments are going out on time, everything's processed. Is there anything you need from me on the Hargrove file? He stared at me for a moment. That's not what I asked. I know, I said, pleasantly. Have a good afternoon. By the middle of the second week, 3 more clinicians had stopped by my desk with variations of the same concern. A quiet consensus was forming in that building, the kind that forms organically in places where everyone is professionally attuned to behavioral change. And somewhere down the hall, behind a closed office door, Marguerite had no idea that the thing she had created was developing its own momentum. What she did not know yet was that 14 people who assess psychological distress for a living had quietly, independently arrived at the same conclusion about my behavior, and that they had started talking to each other about it. The call to her office came on a Thursday morning, about a week and a half after I had implemented the new protocol. Marguerite's assistant appeared at my desk and told me the director would like a few minutes with me when I had a moment. I had a moment. I always had a moment when the director wanted one. I sat down across from her in the same chair I'd sat in when she gave me the instruction. She had the posture of someone who has rehearsed a conversation and is now slightly unsure of how to begin it. "How are things going?" she asked. "Wonderfully," I said. "Assignments are all current, no backlogs. Paperwork is tracking ahead of schedule this week, actually." She nodded slowly. "That's good," she said. "That's good." She paused. "I've been hearing some things from the clinical team." I waited. "A few of them have come to me," she said, expressing some concern about you. I kept my expression even and open. "They feel you've been withdrawn, unusually so. They mentioned that you don't seem like yourself, that you've been distant, that you're not engaging with them the way you normally would. A couple of them specifically used the word depression." She said that last word carefully, the way you say a word you know has weight. "They want me to check in and make sure you're okay." I let a beat pass. "I'm completely fine," I said. "I genuinely am. I took what you said seriously, and I've been keeping my interactions exactly where you told me to keep them. Greetings, task handoffs, back to my desk. It's been working really well for my workflow." She looked at me, and I watched something move across her face that I can only describe as the expression of a person doing arithmetic in their head and not enjoying the answer. She did not say anything for a moment. She looked at the desk, she looked at her hands, then she looked back at me. "The staff is worried about you," she said again, as if repeating it might land differently. "They think something might be going on. I know. Several of them have come to check on me individually. They've been very kind. I told each of them that I was fine and focused on my work. I think that's probably what gave them the concern, actually. I'm so focused that I'm not chatting." Another pause, a longer one this time. "Well," she said finally, and she cleared her throat, and she straightened a paper on her desk that did not need straightening. "The clinical environment here is a bit different from a standard office. The team works with a lot of heavy material, and the collegial atmosphere is part of what keeps the morale functional." She paused again. "Maybe just keep the conversations to a few minutes. Don't cut people off entirely. A couple of minutes is fine." I looked at her. She looked at me. "That's no problem at all," I said. And I stood up, and I smoothed my jacket, and I walked back to my desk. Now here is the thing I want to sit with for a moment, because the story technically ends there, and the compliance was technically complete, but the fullness of what had just happened was still settling in the room behind me. Marguerite had called me in to address the fallout of her own instruction. She had identified a problem, traced it back through 14 concerned clinicians to a single source, and that source was the behavior she had specifically requested. She could not say that. She could not say, I told you to stop talking, and now everyone thinks you're in a crisis, and I need you to please start talking again." She could not say it, because saying it would mean acknowledging the full circuit of what had happened, that she had given a bad instruction, and the building had responded to it with measurable, documented alarm. So instead, she gave me a new, softer instruction. A few minutes is fine. And she dressed it up as a reasonable middle ground, as if that had been the guidance all along, and we had simply miscommunicated about degree. I did not argue. I did not revisit it. I said, "No problem," and I meant it. The next morning, I greeted Dr. Fenella Asai when she walked in and asked how her commute had been. Her face visibly relaxed. She told me about the delay on the bridge, and I listened and laughed at the right moment, and she left for her office looking about 4 degrees lighter than she had looked the morning before. Tobias came in 10 minutes later, and I asked about the case he had been working on, and he leaned on the counter for about 4 minutes telling me about a documentation dispute he was trying to navigate, and when he finally pushed off to go to his office, he said, "Good to have you back." I said, "I never went anywhere." And that was true. I had not gone anywhere. I had done exactly what I was told. I had been, throughout the entirety of those 2 weeks, fully compliant, fully present, fully professional, and producing work that was, by every measurable standard, on time and accurate. The only thing I had removed was warmth, and the building had noticed within days. 14 people, whose careers are built on reading human behavior, had registered the absence of one receptionist's chattiness as a potential mental health concern. They had brought it to the director, and the director had been required to course-correct her own instruction without being able to name it as such. There is a particular kind of quiet satisfaction that comes from that. Not triumphant, not loud, just the clean, simple satisfaction of having followed a rule so completely that the rule revealed its own flaw. But I want to tell you one more thing, because there is a detail in this story that I have been sitting on. After everything settled, after the mornings went back to their normal shape, and the clinicians stopped stopping by my desk with concerned expressions, and the hallways felt like themselves again, I thought a lot about what the past 2 weeks had actually demonstrated. Not about Marguerite, about the job itself. What had just happened, quietly and without any orchestration on my part, was that a building full of mental health professionals had measured the value of human connection in a workplace. They had done it empirically, in real time, without knowing they were doing it. They had noticed the absence of something they had never formally identified as necessary, and they had named it, reported it, and asked for it back. And the person who had removed it had been the one to feel the consequence. That is not a small thing. I still work with people. I still greet everyone when they walk through the door. I still notice when someone looks like they did not sleep, and I still say something small and human when I slide the assignments across the desk. Marguerite and I continued in that same cycle for as long as I was there, the hot months, the cold months, the watch the receptionist closely months. I never knew what triggered it, and I eventually stopped trying to figure it out. But I will tell you this, she never told me to stop talking again. Whatever that instruction had cost her in terms of the conversation she had to have with 14 therapists who came to her office one by one to say that the woman at the front desk seemed like she might not be okay, that cost was apparently high enough that she did not want to pay it twice. Sometimes, malicious compliance is a grand gesture. It is a patent clause activated in a conference room. It is a pile of leaves launched over a fence with a riding mower. It is a resignation letter that copies the CEO. Sometimes it is 2 weeks of professional, cheerful, completely documented silence in a behavioral healthcare agency. And sometimes it is enough. If this story resonated with you, drop something in the comments. Tell me about the workplace instruction that backfired on the person who gave it. Tell me about the rule that got reversed because following it was worse than breaking it. And if you are not subscribed, consider it. These stories are here every time you need them. Take care of yourselves out there.